بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين الحبيب المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته الكرام المنتجبين. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, may all the praise be to God, the Lord of the universe, and may all the peace and the blessings be upon all the prophets, especially the greater prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, and upon his purified progeny and the believers of his companions. Dear brothers, sisters, and friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and the blessings be upon all of you, and thank you for joining us for a new sessions of Quran study that starts this evening after the month of Ramadan. This evening we will study chapter 25. It's called Surah Al-Furqan. Surah Al-Furqan, chapter 25. It is named Al-Furqan because in the first verse in this chapter, the word Al-Furqan is mentioned, and in a few minutes I will talk about the meaning of this word. What does it mean? Chapter Al-Furqan, in the order of the Quran, the book of the Quran is 25. So it is number 25. In the order that it was revealed, it is 42. So this is a Meccan chapter, a chapter that was revealed in Mecca. Though some scholars and commentators say some or a few of its verses were revealed in Medina. But the general perception and understanding is this is a chapter that was revealed in Mecca 3 years after the beginning of the ministry of the Prophet. So this is a significant chapter. Why? Because it started 3 years after the ministry of the Prophet. We know from history that the first 3 years of Prophet Muhammad's sallallahu alaihi wasallam ministry was in a private, based on invitations. After 3 years, God sent him a command and told him, now you can go public and invite everyone to the faith of Islam. So after these 3 years, this chapter Al-Furqan come. I will start reading the Arabic. We start with first verse, inshallah, and Muhammad Rida will read the translation. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تبارك الذي نزل الفرقان على عبده ليكون للعالمين نذيرا.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Hallowed is the one who sent down the criterion upon his servant that they may be a warner to the world.
So this chapter starts with saying in Arabic, Tabarak alladhi. The word Tabarak, translated in many translations of the Quran, is into blessed is God. I like the translation offered by Muhammad Asad, hallowed be God, which means he is holy, and I would like to talk about this word. Tabarak actually comes from the word baraka. Baraka is translated into English into the word blessings. So when somebody tells you, may God bless you, in Arabic, you may say, may God give you barakah. It means may God give you abundance of good things for permanence. So there is permanence aspect and abundance aspect in barakah. Barakah has two significant meanings. One is abundance of good things, and the other aspect is permanence. So this blessing stays with you forever. So when somebody says, may God bless you, it means may God give you abundance of blessings, of good things, and forever. These blessings stay with you forever. This is the meaning of barakah. Now, we use this and say, may God give you barakah, bless you. And sometimes we say Ramadan Mubarak or Eid Mubarak. May God make your Eid or your month of Ramadan a blessed one, gives abundance of good things to your Eid day or the month of Ramadan. However, this verse is talking about God, who is the source of a blessing. Nobody blessed God. He is the source of a blessing. So when we use the word barakah for God, we say tabarak. When we use the word blessed for people or things, we say mubarak. These are the differences in Arabic. Tabarak for God, because He is the source of giving, and Mubarak are for those who are blessed by God, things or humans who are blessed by God. So the verse starts with the first verse start with تبارك الذي نزل الفرقان. He is the source of a blessing. Who is the source of a blessing? The one who sent down the Furqan. The Furqan here means the Quran. And I'll talk about this in a minute. It is God who sent down the Quran, and God is the source of a blessing. And later I will talk about why God used the word Tabarak here for sending the Quran. So this verse is using the word Furqan in a state of Quran. What is Furqan? Furqan is something or someone who distinguishes between things. And the Quran, in fact, distinguishes between what is right and what is wrong. Quran tells us and teaches us what is right and what is wrong. And this is why the Quran is called the Furqan, because it distinguishes between what is wrong and what is right. Not only in issues of religion, but also in issues of non-religious matters. Let me give you an example. The Quran tells us justice is good. Practice justice and stay away from aggression and injustice. Probably you've heard this verse many times. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى. God commands justice and doing good, ihsan, doing good, charity, وإيتاء ذي القربى, and giving and reaching out to the kin, to the family and relatives. These are good things. God is commanding us to do them. On the other side, the verse says, وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ. And He forbids shameful acts, wrongdoings, and aggression against others. So this is a very clear example of how the Quran distinguishes between what is good and between what is wrong. And this is about religion. How about things not necessarily related to religion? For example, I'll give you another example. This verse is verse 67 in this chapter that we will read later, inshallah, a few weeks ahead of later we will study it. It says وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَنفَقُوا لَمْ يُسْرِفُوا. There are a set of verses that talks about the manners of good believers. Good believers. What are their characteristics? What are their manners? And one aspect of this manners is that when it comes to spending, general spending, it does not mean charity alone, but also personal spending. When they spend, they are not extreme in their spending. لم يسرفوا. They are not extravagant in their spending. وَلَمْ يُقْتِرُوا. On the other side, they are not stingy. They do not hold tight their spending. So both aspects are not good. Both aspects are wrong. Neither spending in a very extreme way, nor not spending at all, but seeking a balance in the middle. Seeking وَكَانَ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ قَوَامًا. They seek a very balance in the middle of these two situations, spending moderately. So this is basically one meaning of the word Furqan, which is another name for the Quran. The other meaning for Furqan is, in regard with the Quran, is that the Quran was sent down on a period of 23 years, not in one time. The Quran was sent down to people that the Prophet ﷺ would teach the people over a period of time, gradually. This is the meaning of Quran. The Quran itself, it says وَقُرْآنًا فَرَقْنَاهُ, a Quran that we sent on stages gradually, لِتَقْرَأَهُ عَلَى النَّاسِ عَلَى مَكْثٍ. So you will recite it for people, you teach it to the people over a period of time. So these two meanings for the word Furqan, distinguishing between what is wrong, what is right, and the other meaning is that the Quran came over many stages, over 23 years. So again, we go back to the verse. It says, تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ الْفُرْقَانِ. Blessed is, or hallowed is, the one who sent down the Quran, to whom he sent down the Quran. Ala abdihi, the Quran said, to his servant. Ala abdihi. The word abdihi translated again in different ways. Many use the word abdihi. Many use the word servant. Let us see what is the root of this word. Abdihi comes from the origin of ibadah, to worship. When somebody worship God, it's called ibadah. And from that word comes abd, which means somebody who worships God. So abd, in fact, means somebody who worships God, who he or she is a devotee in their worshiping God. I would prefer the word devotee rather than servant. Though servant is also a good translation. Somebody who is in his worship, he is at the service of God and the faith of God. And what is amazing in this part here is that God has himself said, this is my servant, abdihi. God has claimed that Prophet Muhammad, and later at the end of this chapter, God has said other people, those who worship me also, Ibadur Rahman, those are my servants or devotees, those who worship me and me alone. أنزل على عبده تبارك الذي نزل الفرقان على عبده. So God sent the Furqan to his devotee to do what? ليكون للعالمين نذيرا. So he may become a warner for the whole world, for the worlds, or for the whole world. First, للعالمين, the word للعالمين, which is translated into worlds or the whole world, which means, based on the Quran and what we believe, God has created many different creations, including humans, and also creations that we do not see that are called jinn. So those are commanded by God to follow the message of the Prophet, not only at this time, but since 14 centuries ago, the beginning of the ministry of the Prophet. They are commanded to follow the guidance of the Quran, and not only the past, but also the future, to follow the guidance of the Quran. And what is important to mention here, dear brothers and sisters, do you remember that I said this verse, this chapter came only 3 years after the beginning of the ministry of the Prophet? And now remember, in this verse, God is saying, we are sending this Furqan, this Quran, to Prophet Muhammad, so he convey this to the whole world. So opposite to what some people, especially Orientalists, who said the Quran is only for the Arab tribes in Arabian Peninsula. So this verse in fact says no. The Quran was not sent only to Arab tribes, to the pagan Arabs in Arabian Peninsula. In fact, it is sent for everyone, all people throughout the world and throughout history and in the future. This is what, so the Quran is available for everybody, and the faith of Islam is available for everybody to embrace. Islam welcomes, because this is the command of God, Islam welcomes people to embrace the faith. Now, the last word says, God sent him this Furqan to be a warner for the whole world. Warner, which is a translation of the word Nadhir. However, we know that the Quran and God has described the Prophet as somebody who gives glad tidings and a warner. But this verse did not mention the word Bashir or Mubashiran. Did not mention it. Also only mentioned the word warner. The answer is, brother and sisters, if you are asking why the word Bashir or Mubashiran is not mentioned here, scholars say it is already given, because we know that God has mentioned this in other chapters, that he is somebody who brought glad tidings and a warning. So it is already given, and they give an example. They give an example of another verse in the Quran that says, وَجَعَلْنَا لَكُمْ سَرَابِيلَ تَقِيكُمُ الْحَرِّ. God says, we have made for you clothing that protect you from hot weather, from the heat. Now, obviously, clothing protects us from cold as well. So it is given. So the Quran did not mention the word cold only mentioned the word heat here because it is already included in the meaning that clothes give a protection against heat or cold, against hot weather or cold weather. And one more thing, why, you might ask, so why not God said only cold weather, not hot weather? The answer is, in the beginning, the Quran came in Mecca. Mecca was and still is always has a hot weather. Even if you go in December and January, it is a very mild weather. You really barely feel the cold. However, in other months, it is really hot. So for people who lived there and is still living there, if the Quran would say, God made the clothes for you to protect you from hot weather and cold weather, they might have said, which cold weather are you talking about? We don't have a cold weather here. It's only hot weather. So this is an example, just an example. Now, we go back to the word that God sent the prophet to the whole world as a warner here. Remember, again, this verse came in Mecca in the first, after the first 3 years. After the first 3 years, the number of Muslims were barely 50 or 60 members. But the larger population of Mecca were pagans. And this is why the Quran, when it came there, was warning the pagans that if you continue worshiping idols instead of God, this message is to warn you to accept God as Allah as one God and worship Him, and not to worship the idols. With this, we come to the end of this verse, and today evening, I think we have already 24 minutes since the beginning. The next verse will be a little bit long, and it needs more timing. So inshallah, we start with next chapter next week, 6 p.m. at this time. I have a question from a brother who asked, what about abd, the word abd that we mentioned, as a slave? As a slave. This is a very good question. The word slave in Arabic is called abd as well. And this is why the confusion started. The word, again, the word abd comes from the word ibadah, which means worshipping. However, there is another name for meaning for the word abd, which means a slave. So the slaves used to be called abd as well. And a lot of people, even in the translation, they would translate the word Abdullah or Ibadullah into the slaves of God. And I believe this might create little bit confusion. In our faith, what is required from Muslims to submit totally to God. When we submit to the will of God, it means that we basically give a priority to the will of God and the command of God before our desire. So the command of God comes first, then my desire, if it is not conflicting with God's desire. Let's say if somebody wants to drink wine, for example, that is his or her desire. But when they practice the faith, they put the command of God before their own desire, so they abstain from drinking water. This is submission to the command and to the will of God. This submission, also some people called it as slavery, as a form of slavery. I don't think this is the slavery in English. This is what is meant to be. It is actually submission, because the difference is, I tell you the difference why I don't believe this is a correct translation. A slave submits against his or her own will. They are forced. Those slaves were kidnapped from somewhere, brought to a new land and a new world, and sold in the slave market against their own will. This is a slavery. But what the Quran is referring to is submission with the free will. The person himself or herself, their own desire that they submit to God and put His command before theirs. So that is the difference. I do not like the word slavery in English because it does not reflect the free will in the human when they submit to God at all. While in Arabic, the word abd does reflect because it is rooted in the word worshiping God based on free will, his own free will to submit to God, or her free will to submit to God. We come to the end of our Quran study for tonight. Inshallah, I'll see you next week. Thank you very much.